my family was really separated at this point. There just was a lot of dysfunction. Culture for which our family was kind of built upon was just this sort of low-key bullying, passive aggressiveness, and separation, and arguing and fighting. It was like any attempt to even kind of all of us come together anymore at this point was not either non-existent or was always a struggle. But like God had given me the tools to actual healing and to acceptance, to kind of rewrite your story and be truly in alignment with God. And even though my brother Silvio was never openly, Christian or anything like that, he had connection to the universe, as he would put it. But my brother Carmen was openly Christian. My mother claimed to be a Catholic. Invite them over. And I had talked to Silvio a little bit about this prior to them coming over to dinner. I got Olive Garden, paid for dinner for all of us, and they brought their wives with them. And initially it was good. I was a little taken aback when my brother Carmen came in, and he made some comment about like, well, are you going to be able to afford this place? And it was so strange. It was like, coming from somebody who's like, yeah. I thought it was such a weird thing. Like that wouldn't ever be something that I would say when I would walk into somebody's home. It was strange. A single mom with 2 kids. So yeah, I have to be mindful, but I just went through the whole process and set myself, like before we even had a conversation about how things had been going with my business, like they really, to my understanding, had no idea about my business, my ministry, like all of the work that I had put in, which I had planned on sharing with them at this time. To get into that though, I started talking to them about really what I would love to see happen for our family, and sort of rewriting the boundaries, rewriting the rules. If not even necessarily for us, maybe not all of us would be able to heal our relationships, as far as myself, my sister, and my siblings, my brothers. But for the cousins, the nieces and the nephews, feel comfortable with each other and feel safe, and not feel like they were going to be diminished or devalued, and just being free in who they are, and just a safer environment. And one of the first things we sort of were going to have to navigate was this narcissistic energy, this very self-serving, this lack of boundaries, this gaslighting culture, this passive aggressive culture, and by definitely the gossiping culture, devaluing and diminishing each other, like contorting narratives about each other behind each other's backs. That was a common theme that pretty much everybody had talked about at some point, that they didn't appreciate and didn't like. Because they would hear from one family member like this, and it would just, ex-wives or the kids would have false narratives going, and it always was a source of contention amongst pretty much all of us at some point. So I knew that it was going to require buy-in by at least the 2 of them to be able to accomplish this, because it was going to take some effort. But at any point, anything can happen to us, and you want your children to be able to have family and have other people they can lean into through unconditional love, and not this like transactional molding of who you have to be to feel safe in this family, of who you have to be to feel invested in this family. And so one of the first things I knew we were going to have to kind of navigate was dealing with this narcissistic energy, which pretty much started with my mother. It would never be right for somebody to have to tell you like, hey, you can't talk to that person because I want you to support only me. I was never going to do that, because I wasn't attempting to try to control anybody. But what I did see as possible was creating a consistent boundary for all of us. So if somebody oversteps a boundary in any way, let's say it's for taking the last Thanksgiving prior to that, somebody oversteps a boundary in a way in which dishonors, disrespects, creates an issue. Whomever is doing that then is kind of like separating themselves from that event. It's kind of like you get a timeout. If your behavior is like, if you're going to have a tantrum around this and you can't this minimally respect what somebody wants to bring to dinner, what time they're going to show up with their kids, these very basic things, right? Normal communication. If you can't do that, then don't show up, because it's going to create friction and trauma and drama for everybody else, right? These seem like very basic, minimal standards that we could set. Well, almost immediately, my brothers, they did acknowledge, like they could, they did validate and acknowledge where I was coming from on this. But then they start like going in on me about my mom, like that I'm constantly trying to blame everything all on mom, validate where it was coming from, but they were unwilling to truly look at the consequences of her actions, just like she was unwilling to look at the consequences of her actions. And acknowledging that when you take action, when you do something, it has a consequence. So taking legal recourse against your own child in an attempt to come in between their relationship with their child and their rules for their household, which, by the way, my brothers would never allow for somebody to do that to them. They wouldn't allow it. And so for me, it was like, well, that was her choice. That was the action she took. There's consequences of that. I don't hold any anger. I've already forgiven her for it. I've told her that. But that doesn't then cancel the consequences of it. It's like, no, that there's still a consequence of that. And that showed me how I can engage. But that doesn't mean that I want to create this complete separation in our family, this continual pushback. And I got a little frustrated with them, because it's like, here I am actually in this conversation present with you, trying to talk about healing and moving forward, but it's like you are pushing back because I'm acknowledging where the root sort of started. You can't move forward until you really acknowledge where it's kind of starting, and having the self-awareness to recognize this. My brother Carmen says to me, when Milena was younger, mom did a lot for her and all of this. And I was like, yes, I understand that. And then he goes on to say, I was talking not too long ago with Alexis and Tori. These are my two oldest nieces, his daughter and my brother Nick's daughter, about how you didn't come to like birthday parties, or like you didn't come to certain events and stuff. And mom was the one who would like bring Milena. I just paused for a second, because also here I am in this conversation acknowledging something that is an issue, like gossiping. And you are actually telling me in this conversation that you yourself engage in that behavior. First of all, why are you talking about your adult sister with your daughter and your niece? Second of all, why are you bringing something up from like 15 years earlier? And not only that, I was in college and working at an emergency clinic at night as a newly single parent from another parent who had died. I wasn't a socialite. I wasn't out partying. It was so strange to me. It's like, wait a second. I recalled when both of my brothers that were sitting in my living room at that time, numerous times when those very daughters were the same age as mine, that I would be out at their house. Sometimes I would spend during the summer times, I would spend entire weeks at their house to watch their kids when they were going through their divorces, or when they would actually go out of town or go on vacation, when they actually were socializing. I would be spending the night at their house to watch their children. I've done that with every single one of my brothers. Never once ever brought that up, ever used it as leverage in a conversation. Couldn't miss it. And it was like it came into my awareness all at once, and I got very quiet. I got emotional, but I got very quiet because I recognized in that moment, you're trying to put me in a stronghold. That is a stronghold. When somebody leverages something that was done for you, especially a family, that should just be done from unconditional love. Like my own mother, watching my daughter for me, bringing her to a family event so my daughter doesn't feel excluded because I'm at work or school, and a newly single parent, that isn't something that should ever be leveraged in a conversation or gossip. That is a stronghold. And this was very telling of something else. Ever skewed perception that my eldest brother Carmen had at that time that led him to believe that I owed my mother something. And some of the times even my mother would request to take my daughter. I didn't ask her. She would request to take my daughter. Sometimes she didn't even ask. She would just take my daughter. Whatever his perception was of that, 15 years earlier, and this is why it's a stronghold, he was holding on to that perception all of this time. So anything, any growth, any learning, anything that I had grown through, anything I had healed from, which by this point was like colossal. He had no understanding of whatsoever. He had arrived at his own perception, his own limited perception, and was holding on to that and was unwilling to confront himself in recognizing I don't even know my own sister. Because he didn't know me. I mean, we're talking about one of the most difficult times of my life when my daughter's father passed away. Being a full-time student, being new to the animal emergency clinic and adjusting to working second and third shift, trying to manage life and get through that level of grief on my own. And the amount of effort I put into that, the counseling, the group therapy, the 5Ks that I ran in his honor, like I recognized like my brother had no understanding of who I was like at all. They left. I asked them to leave because it was like they were arguing with me in my own house when I'm sitting here trying to have an intention around healing. It seemed like they had a totally different intention than I did. In fairness, my brother Carmen, I think, did text me about a week later and apologized. He said he felt bad for that. And then maybe Silvio did too. But those are those moments where people have to be ready to receive you. They have to be willing to confront themselves and challenge themselves in their own misjudgments. And if they can't do that, you are just going to drain your energy. And I recognized that in that moment. And it was painful for me because it was like, well, it doesn't seem like they're going to be in alignment with my intention to create a better foundation for our family. And for whatever reason, I just have to surrender that to God. And from my perception, especially now, it would seem like that was God protecting me at that moment. And I didn't know it at the time. But again, because of my closeness with God and my willingness to just surrender that to God and not even be angry with them, but just recognize that there was a reason that God didn't want that to happen at that time. And it was contingent a lot on their willingness to participate. And it seemed like they weren't willing to participate in that way. I was frustrated because I respect both of my brother's wives. I respect them both, but Carla has been around for quite a while. So I really value her perspective on things. And Christy too, even though she hadn't been around for quite a while, but it was like they jumped in on the conversation when it sort of got a little bit heated. And so it was like 4-on-1 in my house. And especially for the two of them, it just seemed like it was not an appropriate time for them to be contributing their opinion to the situation. But it wasn't like that I was upset with them in any way. It was a conversation that was meant to be had between me and my siblings and how we can form a foundation, but also a better foundation. Like, can we repair the cracks here? And of course, they're going to be included in that. That's their wives. Also had another understanding of something, and it was about their leadership in that moment. Because to me, it would have seemed appropriate had I been in that situation with a partner. That would not have been a time that I would have started over talking my husband in that moment. Wife or a woman, from my perspective, again, this is my opinion, and it is limited too because I'm not a wife and I've never been a wife. But those are moments where you have an opportunity to add nurturing and love to a situation, especially if it starts to get a little bit heated and things from a higher perspective. And so it was more of a disappointment that that didn't happen. Especially Carla, because I've always seen Carla as like very grounded, and even though she doesn't speak up a lot, I do really value her opinion when she does. I saw it as a missed opportunity there, but it's just the way that it went. Significant for what happened later down the road a little bit. But something else shortly after that significant happened. Months and months earlier, quite a while before this, my brother Silvio had mentioned about one of my aunts, my dad's aunts, had passed away. Energy company wanted to be able to drill on the land. And so he was talking to me about like all the options, be able to like collect a royalty on it. Like if you wanted a single payout or if you wanted to be able to collect a royalty